Board comment.
I thought this was just...
Mr. Ramsey.
Do we go on, I don't know how this works, Dr. Harder, because don't we close the public hearing, then we
Yes.
go, and then we...
Close the public hearing.
And then do we go on to F4 at this point, Dr. Harder? Because I just know that under F3, received a copy of the draft, and I got the draft request for the waiver, and I want to thank Martin, and he had it out on the counters on December. Can he come up? I want to ask, make sure it's in the record.
So tonight what we're bringing to the board is a recommendation for approval of a resolution to seek a debt limit waiver from the State Board of Education. And this would be a request to the State Board to set a limit of 5% of our assessed valuation for 12 years, so that we could actually go out and issue the bonds under Measure E of 2012.
Right. Can I have the, because there was a so we're on F4 now, Dr. Harder? All right, because I know there was a presentation that I thought was going to be made by K&N, is that correct? Is Piper Jaffrey here, and De La Rosa and Dave Casnocha, are they here? And
They're all here.
oh yeah, if they can come up, and Krishna Petit, is she here too from GCR? Because I have a lot of questions after the presentation. But you may have public comment on this. Do you have public comment on this?
There are 3 people here for public comment. Presentation and let them do the public comment.
Right.
Thank you, President Cronenberg, Dr. Harder, members of the board. My name's Dave Olson. I'm with K&N Public Finance, and I'm here to make a presentation tonight about the bonding capacity, the resolution to request a bonding capacity waiver from the State Board of Education. I'm here tonight with other members of the financing team, David Casnocha, the district's bond counsel, Krishna Pettit, the district's disclosure counsel, Jeff Barata, who works for Piper Jaffray, and Scott Henry of E.J. De La Rosa, who underwrite the district's bonds. So tonight's resolution essentially...
You got to speak up. You got to speak in the mic. I can't hear you. You're whispering.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Tonight's resolution accomplishes essentially 4 objectives. Those are listed on this slide. It asserts that the district's voters have approved 2012 Measure E. It acknowledges that the State Department of Ed has the right to waive the bonding capacity. It reports that the district has satisfied certain objectives. We'll talk about those later. And it directs the superintendent to cause the waiver application to be submitted. We're planning on doing that this Friday if the board approves doing so tonight. So brief background, the statutory bonding capacity is a limitation on the amount of bonds that a school district can have outstanding for a unified school district. It limits the amount outstanding to be 2.5% of the district's then current assessed value. We meet this requirement by asserting when we sell bonds that by selling those bonds, it does not cause us to exceed that limitation, so that if you issue bonds and subsequently your tax base declines, you're not in violation of the waiver. But each time you issue new bonds, you have to sign a certificate that says you're below your statutory bonding capacity, and for unified school districts, that's set at 2.5% of the then current assessed value. So today, and we show on this chart, the district would not be able to issue any of the 2012 Measure E bonds that were just approved. And this chart is specific to the 2012 Measure E because you do have a waiver on 2005 Measure J to 3.5% and 2010 Measure D to 5%. But your current assessed value is $23.6 billion. 2.5% of that would be $590 million. You currently have $797 million worth of bonds outstanding. So you're over your bonding capacity now, in part because of declines in assessed value, but in part because of the waivers achieved on the prior authorizations. In terms of future bonding capacity, if the waiver stays at 2.5%, it would be a long time before you'd be able to issue these recently approved bonds. And this chart does a calculation that's in several steps. It takes the bonding capacity, assuming 2.5%, and growth at separate levels, 2%, 4%, 6%, and 8% growth in assessed value. It deducts out the amount of bonds that you will have outstanding in future years. It also deducts out potential issues of 2010 Measure D, which are assumed to be issued at about $70 million a year. And it shows that for 2013, are you hearing the ringing? I apologize. For 2013, you'd be...
We have a little feedback here, yes.
Okay, is there anything I can do about that? Okay. Okay, thank you. That you'd be $150 million or so, depending on growth next year, over your bonding capacity at 2.5%, and that if your assessed value grows, even if your assessed value grows at 8%, it's be a number of years before you'd be below your 2.5% and allow for issuance of 2012 Measure E. If you grow at just 2%, which is well below your historic growth. But if you grow up just 2%, we'd barely be able to issue bonds in 2025. So access to these bonds, it's important to get a waiver of this of the statutory bonding capacity. In the event you choose not to apply, or the waiver is not granted, there'd be consequences on the program. Remember, when we went for the 2010 Measure D, we acknowledged the program would slow down. And one of the points of this 2012 Measure E was to bring back the pace of expenditures to what the public had indicated they wanted in polls and in contact with board members.
Just step a little closer to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. A number of the projects, even high visibility projects. I know the Panola Valley High School is one that the district wants to accomplish.
Yeah, Panola would be at risk, right?
Further delayed. If projects are delayed, costs are likely to increase. And what we've seen in our experience around the state in recent years, as access to money is slower than the public wants the project done, it increases the pressure to use higher cost, more expensive financing vehicles like cabs, and riskier financing techniques like bond anticipation notes, things that we've been trying to avoid here. So there would be negative consequences if the waiver is not approved. In anticipation of applying for this waiver, we've taken care to follow through on what the law requires, which is to present material to public boards, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. We made a presentation to them in December, as well as the Facilities Subcommittee. I know the union reps, the United Teachers of Richmond, has already approved it, maybe Local 1 as well.
Yeah,
Dr. Harder
also approved it.
City councils have expressed their support for the bonding capacity waivers as kind of representatives of the citizens in their city. And we've even been asked to, some of the special districts, Steed Sanitation and West County Wastewater have asked to express their support and have passed resolutions already. And we held the public hearing earlier tonight and heard the one supporting voice.
Yeah, one thing you have to include is that the Contra Costa Building and Construction Trades Council has also supported this resolution as well.
No, thank you, yes, and that will be included. All of these letters of support will be included in the application, which is planned to be submitted Friday, and any resolutions approved after that will be forwarded to the State Department of Ed. At that point, I know there's been a number of people who have expressed interest in writing letters of support for this bonding capacity waiver.
I mean, tomorrow we go to the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. Okay, and then February 13th is the Rodeo Hercules Fire Protection Board.
So there have been a number of cities and special districts who have indicated they wanted to support the district's effort in this regard. When we've made these presentations to city councils and to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, we've explained the rationale that we've written up in the narrative of the application, which basically says that the community has been supportive. It's the will of the people that these projects move forward, that there's a need to do these projects for student safety, equity issues, adequate facilities, those type of things, that the voter approval of the 2012 Measure E was indicative of the public support that you move ahead at a faster pace than was allowable under just 2010 Measure E. That voters are aware through the transparency of the processes here in the public meetings that a waiver was going to be requested. We also included language in the ballot measure to that extent, but it's been discussed in public meetings, that the district will be able to implement this program without increasing the tax rates beyond what have been approved by the voters, and those, the district has never exceeded the tax rate, the targeted tax rates. So the voters have spoken a number of times, and the district has put in the projects at the cost that were estimated, and that restricting access to these bond proceeds based on assessed value was unfair, inequitable to school districts like West Contra Costa, where the number of students being educated is disproportionately high vis-a-vis the size of the district's tax base. We are confident that the Department of Ed will hear positively on our account, in part because of Section 33051 of the Education Code, which sets forth, this is probably, we could speak, David could speak more.
I wanted David to speak about this.
But this it suggests that there are certain circumstances under which a waiver can be denied. They're listed out here, but other than that, the law states that the State Board shall approve requests for the waiver. Did you want to hear from Mr. Kaznoka now? Or,
Yeah, it's part of the presentation.
Sure.
To talk about this. He's the lawyer. What does this language mean to him?
Well, my name is David Kaznoka from Stradling Alco, and are you asking what I think of that provision of the Ed Code, whether it's...
Yeah, and what its impact is, or what do we have to do to be legally compliant?
Well, I've always read that section to be fairly strong wording that the presumption is in favor of the granting of a waiver unless certain conditions can be demonstrated. I think that's part of the reason why you've been successful in the past, is that you've satisfied all the steps that have to be adhered to, and that the waiver doesn't cause any of these adverse consequences to be affected. Therefore, it ought to be granted automatically as a matter of law, but public policy decision makers can do the funniest things. So I think the efforts that Dave Olson has just described are well worth the time, because it does underscore the participatory nature of the decision-making process that goes into the demonstration of the need for the waiver.
Is there an appeal process if they deny it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Can we get that researched? Because I want to know, is there a, Ms. Kronberg says, good question, is there a ability to have it appealed?
Yeah, my guess is that the answer is you reapply for a waiver, because there's only one entity that's authorized under the statute to grant the waiver, State Board of Education. So I think what you would have to do is just keep reapplying and continue to assert the basis.
Yeah, I just would like to research, see if it goes to the Assembly or the State Senate, or if there's a body that could say, hey, this doesn't look to be fair. And
I'm not aware that the statute provides for that,
okay,
but I'll look into that for you.
Yeah, it'd be helpful.
Okay, and as David said, this is a relatively strong provision. The history is that of the State Board of Education is that they've approved these waivers in the past on a consistent basis.
Have they ever denied
including the
one?
time. I'm not familiar with an occasion where they've
Well, you
denied
need to look that up. I need to know, have they denied it? I asked the question. I'm the one going out to all these councils and calling all these people, so find out if it's ever been denied, and if so, why?
Okay, it's my understanding that it's never been denied. Now, I'm not familiar with any cases. I haven't talked with anyone at the State Board who's familiar with any of the cases.
You know, there's only one waiver law that applies to the 100,000 provisions of the Education Code. So you could ask for a waiver under the same statutory provisions to be relieved of serving ketchup as a vegetable. So there have been I've had school district clients who have had waivers denied. We've applied for a waiver of the $60 tax limit. That has been denied. I don't think there has ever been a waiver of a bonding capacity request that has been denied because the conditions of maintaining the tax rate, which has been sort of the non-statutory topic of conversation with the Board of Education, if you can demonstrate that the tax rate's going to stay within the Prop 39 limits, or if it's not a Prop 39 bond, to stay within the tax rate, they've granted every single one of those, but they don't grant every single waiver just as a matter of course.
Right, no, that's what I was trying to get at, that the voters had approved a tax rate of another $48 of an increase, and so that tax rate has to be based on some source to tax. So if the voters have already approved it, then they're saying they're willing to pay $48 more, then it has to be $48 on something. So why would they deny a waiver if the voters have said they're willing to pay it? I mean, is that accurate, David?
Well, I don't think they're going to deny the waiver. I don't know that it's going to be on that basis. I think the fact that the voters have approved the issuance of bonds is significant. I think I've said this to you guys before. The law has a lot of safeguards in it to prevent abuses and to safeguard against reckless behavior. So the bonding capacity test is not just general obligation bonds, it's lease obligations too. Those laws are designed to prevent poorly managed districts from incurring indebtedness that places themselves in financial jeopardy. So this law is designed to safeguard against that. And I think the waiver application talks to the successes that the district has in improving, to the point of admiration, a generally stable financial condition as evidenced by the improved bond ratings that the district has received over the last 4 or 5 years. So if you combine that with the safeguard to the taxpayers, because the voters have approved this bond, so what are the safeguards to the taxpayers that they're not going to be unfairly treated by the grant of the waiver? And the safeguard is that there's, under Proposition 39, a $60 per $100,000 tax rate cap. So long as the taxpayers' interests are safeguarded by the maintenance of the tax within the Prop 39 limits, the district's financial stability is safeguarded by the preservation of an appropriate amount of indebtedness measured by a percentage of assessed value, and to the extent that you've demonstrated financial stewardship by having your bond ratings increase, all the facts and all the safeguards, I think, are going to be fully effectualized by the granting of this waiver. So it would just seem to me that you should get it.
No, I appreciate that, but when I was reading the narrative, I don't know if that was strongly worded enough. So, I mean, I think David's comments need to be captured. I don't know, Dr. Harder, if you did a review it one last time before we submit it, because I read the 5-page narrative, so that is also really driven home.
I know the narrative is out for another round of review, and a number of the people who are reviewing it are in this room, so I'm sure I'll get comments making that case stronger. The timing and the expected result is our expectation is that we'll submit the application through their online process this Friday. That is in enough time to make their March meeting if they don't have any follow-up questions and are able to do the analysis in time. Otherwise, it will be on their May 9th board meeting. Either of those times, as we'll see on the next slide, will be sufficient for the issuance of the Series A bonds. It is likely to be subject to some conditions, and we mentioned, Dr. Harder mentioned in the introduction that we're asking for a waiver up to 5%. They've changed that in the past. In certain cases, I would expect at 5%, they'd keep it at 5%. That's what we got on 2010 Measure D. And they're likely to restrict it in time. We're asking it for to be a 12-year waiver. They could restrict us further than that. That's further than we've gone in the past, but I don't expect them to. The schedule for the issuance, either of those board dates, as I said, will accommodate the scheduled issuance of the Series A bonds. Our plan at this point is to issue bonds in $125 million in alternate years, 13, 15, 17, and to have each of those issues be part 2010 Measure D, part 2012 Measure E. And that will allow us to sell bonds as current interest bonds and not defer as much debt service. So the next series of bond is tentatively scheduled in July. Could be even later than that. We're having discussions between facilities and finance on an ongoing basis. And, so timing and sizing issues are still to be determined. At this point, it looks like July at the earliest, maybe later than that. And that's what it says at the bottom. Final recommendations regarding sizing and time will be developed by the business office, and a recommendation will be made to the board. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.